I am Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain. I return. Welcome to Biblioventures, The Hobbit, episode 9, chapters 10 and 11. A warm welcome and on the doorstep from the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am Edward G. Pettit, and returning tonight as co-host is Robert Barry. Hi, Rob. Welcome back.
Hey, how's everybody?
Well, I'm good. I hope everybody else is good. See you all in the chat there having fun. Um, Someone says, I cannot say how much I enjoy these opening animations. They're adorable. Thank you. I thought so too when Scott Banks made them for us. He's been doing the credit sequence for us for the last few shows, and I really love it. And the music, especially from Pleated Gazelle, I think really makes it. What are you drinking, Rob, as I'm about to ask? Got your wine going?
Once again, perfectly serviceable Chardonnay.
All righty. I was going back and forth as to what I was going to have tonight. I was like, it's like a party in Laketown. What should I have? And then I still have another bottle of the Philadelphia Mead Company. This
Nice.
is and I thought this was appropriate. It's their fall sizer, and it's their description is orange blossom honey wine blended with a local apple cider and aged on allspice and cinnamon. Sizer is a kind of mead that is basically apple mead. It's made with apple cider rather than water. And because it's fall in the story where we're at right now, I thought it was perfect. But also as this kind of apple mead, I'm basically taunting Feely by drinking it today. So it's very appley and it's very,
Just
very
so long as we're not doing fireball shots during the Laketown.
yeah, I can't do it. um, but so that's what I'm drinking. All of you, if you're drinking something lovely, or if you're drinking something perfectly acceptable to you, add it to the chat. I'd love to see what that is, and also add it. You can always send me suggestions to drink something for cocktails or other drinks or non-alcoholic beverages. I'll be happy to share them with others as well. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode. We bring our Biblioventures series to you for free, and there are many other Biblioventures series you can watch on our YouTube channel. If you would like to support the Rosenbach through donation or by becoming a member, I would sincerely appreciate it. You can do this at our website, rosenbach.org. Your support helps us create programs like this and also care for our collections, including the first American edition of The Hobbit, which we just acquired in the last year. And I'd like to specifically thank the Wyncote Foundation for their support of Biblioventures and helping us to make that purchase of that first American edition of The Hobbit. The Wyncote's Foundation mission is to support efforts to strengthen and enrich culture, community, and the natural environment. And I'm very happy they are friends of the Rosenbach. If you're watching for the first time, our approach in this Biblioventure series for The Hobbit is to read The Hobbit just as The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings hasn't happened yet for, 17 years. The Hobbit was a standalone book. And all of the plot of Lord of the Rings had not been come up with by Tolkien yet, so he didn't have any of those ideas. But later, he changed the book, and we'll have a segment at the end of this show to talk about things that can be either different now in the book because of Lord of the Rings, the way Tolkien later changed it, or just things that connect to the greater legendarium. And that'll be at the end of the episode in the segment called The Thane's Book. And as always, no spoilers. Today we're talking about chapters 10 and 11 in the book, so only up to chapter 10 and 11 should you mention in the chat, and that's all that Rob and I will talk about. There are people who are reading for the first time. You guys are so lucky that you get to get through this for the very first time. And
so pay no attention to the fireball shot reference that I made.
yeah.
So that had nothing to do with anything.
Well, last chapter, Rob, the Bilbo's rescue plan has been working so far. They escaped from the Elven King's dungeons, and now the barrels are on their way to Laketown. And the chapter ends with like, have the dwarves survived the trip? Like, are they still alive in there? And honestly, I mean, in a realistic book, it would be a legitimate question.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's Schrodinger's dwarf in there, right? So
but and we'll see as they come out later that it could not have been an easy experience for them. But last time, Rob, we also encountered, and I want to bring this up with you, um, uh, because we looked at what Tolkien may have called his favorite illustration from the story. I don't know if he ever called it that, or if one of his children said that it was his favorite illustration from the story, and that's Bilbo comes to the huts of the raft elves. And I will share that picture right now. Um, we talked about it last week, and I'd love to get your take on it. It is a really beautiful picture, too. I'm not surprised that this may have been, a favorite of his.
no,
Um,
it's absolutely beautiful. Um,
Tell me about it. As an artist, what do you see when you look at this? I mean, for me,
so
it's the strange shape of the trees, the leafage up there, and but how this creates this beautiful image that I'm not used to seeing when I look at nature.
so there's a word that we use in art when we're talking about stained glass or basically cloisonne, which is basically where sections of color are put off through a color bandedness and their shapes are sometimes simplified. And you see a lot of that enter into Art Nouveau, but also in a lot of the illustrations from this time period that Tolkien would have been familiar with. So if you look at the shapes of the foliage on those trees, right, they have their own distinct, almost stained glass window effect. And one of the things that this does, and that Tolkien does really, really well, is he flattens the space of the drawings quite a bit. They're almost isomorphic, where things are further away because of their height in the picture plane, rather than necessarily increased quality of perspective line work to draw it back, right? The picture plane's set pretty much just above dead center. It's a beautiful, beautiful drawing. And to some degree, I think it might be one of my favorites from the book. I have, there's that other one that we did of the lightning in the mountains
Yeah.
from earlier that I truly love because of the inking style that he uses. But I think this is my favorite watercolor of his. And it's for all those things that you're talking about. There's a strange shape. I can't move my mouse over it like you can, but there's not only is there a strange carved out shape and feeling to the foliage up above and how it creates this arch that we're looking through the picture to. But you'll also notice he's done that with the trees on the lower sides, but he's removed a lot of that line. He's separated it a little bit more. So, and this gives a feeling that it's diminishing into a space, right? There's a thing in Italian painting. Well, you wanted me to go here, so I'm here. There's a thing in Italian painting called sfumato, where they use it in order to create deeper space by having things become less distinct and bluer, as if there's a veil of space between you and the deeper quality of the painting. So as you see those trees on the right-hand side, and as they feed back into those lighter trees going into the far distance,
Yeah.
you'll notice a lot of that kind of feeling of sfumato.
Huh. Interesting. All righty. Well, thank you. That's nice insight on this. There was also a
I also like that big black mountain, right?
Oh,
That's
here, yeah, up in
looks
the
like
left.
still hidden and still ahead of them, right?
Yeah. And this was a draft of it, which is it kind of begins to start work out the ideas of it. But I think it's fascinating to look at how this is his kind of first stab at it, and then you get this beautiful second version of it where he's able to take these things. You can see how
So
the trees are starting these shapes.
look at those blue stripes that suggest current coming down from the river into the
Yeah.
lake, right? Now go back to the previous one. See, we've still got some of that,
Yeah.
except he's made them much more stylized. The line work to them is greater, and they still sort of deepen into these softer blues as they come into where the lake is.
Good stuff. All righty. All right. Well, I love having you here to ask you about this kind of stuff. I appreciate it. Also, very briefly. Well, not briefly. It doesn't matter if it's briefly or not. We're not bound by time constraints relatively. Thoughts
Goes along.
thoughts on Bilbo becoming the hero of the story because it's not just the last chapter. It's been the last two chapters. First, he fights off the spiders in the forest, and then especially because he can't have Gandalf come and save them. And that was Tolkien's first idea that you can see in the notes that he's, that were in his notes before he wrote the manuscript up, is that he was going to have Bilbo go get Gandalf. He doesn't, but because I think rightly, Tolkien knows he needs to get Bilbo to rescue the dwarf. Bilbo has to be the one, and also luck comes into play with it too. But that's all there. So your thoughts on Bilbo becoming or am I or do you agree that these are the two chapters we just passed where Bilbo then starts to become the hero of the story?
It starts actually, I think, a lot earlier than that. But there is an interesting thing that occurs here, where how do you take a protagonist, from a story that kind of starts to be a caricature of, complicit rural agrarian life, and turn him into a medieval hero in a larger world around him. That's kind of the big thing that happens in The Hobbit that doesn't happen in those other books that we're not talking about. But in The Hobbit, and Corey Olsen talks about this with his whole balance between the, Baggins and Tookish natures within Bilbo, the idea to have adventures. Something has happened, definitely, with the spiders, where he's now a heroic figure. He's there, and he has to save the dwarves. The dwarves are now by that point, they're what we would have called the sidekicks in 1950s comics. They're the hostage bait, right? And the hero has to come in and save them. That was often the case with the sidekicks and girlfriends in those kind of storytellings. To make the hero, he has to save somebody, from a predicament. And he does not start that way at all. I think when we did that first thing, that first meeting, and we were talking about struck by lightning. It goes a long way to explain what's happening with Bilbo. He's having a convergence. He's having, a moment, and he knows it even then. So.
And no longer falling down in a fit, screaming,
Yeah.
struck by lightning. Yeah. Well, let's see where he's at now. This is chapter 10. He's still on top of the barrels, invisible, and the dwarves are in the barrels. And I like this opening of this chapter with, Tolkien always likes to set the natural surroundings of a scene. And you get that here, the river rounded a steep shoulder of land. And he's very specific about the shape and the landscape that he sees that he wants to describe to you. That the way it rounds the steep shoulder of the land. Under its rocky feet, like an inland cliff, the deepest stream had flowed, lapping and bubbling. And then as Bilbo's looking out, the lands opened wide about him. The waters of the river broke up and wandered in 100 winding courses, or halted in marshes and pools dotted with isles on every side. And then the big image. Far away, its dark head in a torn cloud, there loomed the mountain. Its nearest neighbors to the northeast and the tumbled land that joined it to them could not be seen. All alone it rose and looked across, excuse me, the marshes to the forest, the lonely mountain. Bilbo had come far and through many adventures to see it, and now he did not like the look of it in the least. It's got a nice, cute little ending there.
Want to go there? No, no, no.
It's daunting to him, and we'll get this throughout these 2 chapters today, that he seems to be recognizing the danger more than the dwarves do as to what's going on here now. And they should perfectly be aware of the danger of all this, but they have a different perspective in that they're returning to a home, and Bilbo just sees this ominous,
I will say this, and I don't know if we've said it in earlier ones or not, but if Tolkien didn't have such a great love of language and depth of story and history of story, he could have made a lot more money as a travel writer, right? He is one of the most wonderful writers of nature and experiencing nature. And it's here. It starts in that paragraph that you just read. There's some earlier bits of it too, when they're in the Lonely Lands, but it's pretty great. His ability to sum up the feeling of being in a unique and wondrous landscape comes just straight out of his head into his hand and onto the page.
Yeah,
he's the best travel writer I've ever heard of.
Yeah. As in this next paragraph, it begins, as he listened, Bilbo listened to the talk of the raftmen and pieced together these scraps of information. Just another reminder, because we had this at the end of the last chapter, reminding everybody, these are not men as in humans. When he says raftmen here, he still means elves. His raftman is just a kind of generic job title for any people who run a raft. He had some letters to him from Arthur Ransom, from the famous Swallows and Amazon children's series, books that Tolkien's own children loved. And Ransom had written Tolkien. Tolkien was actually just, really excited that Ransom, this wonderful children's author, would write to him, and wrote him a nice letter back, which he then transcribed both Ransom's letter and his own letter into Tengwar, and had saved them, and then which says what he thought of these letters, and that's why they still exist, because that's how he wound up saving them. But Ransom had pointed out to Tolkien a couple times in the text where one of the characters will say men, and then he's like, but you don't mean men, you mean hobbits, or you mean elves. And Tolkien's like, no, well, no, like if I'm meaning the type of being that I'm talking about as in men, as opposed to elves or dwarves or goblins, then I will use the capital, M in it. But as a generic term, he will use men sometimes, just as people used to say men, meaning all of men, mankind kind of thing. Neil Armstrong did it that way. We don't do that anymore. But Tolkien still did it. And he also knew that he also had in his mind that there was I think a Sindarin word for that encompassed all peoples. So in his head, in a sense, that was translated in the common speech, was then translated into our language, English, and that's how he comes up with that term. I know it's all convoluted, but I bring all this up because it shows the way that Tolkien, even when someone mentions something like that, has to think deeply about it in the whole construction of his world from language, being language based.
Yeah, I think that, we can maybe call on our audience a little bit who has the opportunity to visit Tolkien Gateway and see if they can do a little drill down on that Sindarin word, because I think it's really useful.
There may not have been one. He may have been saying that
He may
there
have done it. He may have made it later.
may have would have been a
Yeah.
Sindarin word that meant this. So
But it's also interesting when we think about the universe of the legendarium, is that we don't have a simple solution like mankind, where we would be able to say mankind was all thinking, people, right?
oh,
People.
I think it's easy to say humankind. It's just easy. I
Well,
mean,
that's what we say now, but when they were using mankind in his time period,
yeah.
they weren't. Um, but but the other races, without going into Lord of the Rings, are also not part of humankind. Even if we just stay here, the elves are something really different, right? So, and we also have numerous cases, which we'll see in later chapters, of sentient animals, right, that are imbued with speech. So, it's not as simple a notion of mankind like he would have had in the world that he came from. He gave these other kinds of races consciousness and moral codes, and he also gave them a completely different set of rules.
He doesn't say Sindarin. He said, and it's my mistake. He says, um, men, in one instance, men is there just a loose rendering of Thorin's word for people. The language of those days, unlike modern English, had a word that included the two kindreds, elves and men, and their likenesses and mockeries. So it would be all these goblins and other creatures too. So uh Thorin certainly included humans in his comment, for elves and dwarves were mightily concerned with them, blah, blah, blah. So, but he was not at that moment thinking chiefly of men with a capital. So M.
It's
So
also interesting that the comment is, from Thorin talking about men, and elves would not have seen dwarves as being their
yeah,
likeness.
yeah,
They're the stunted people.
yeah. Elves are the most racist characters in the
It's so messy.
entire Lord of the
It's
Rings.
so freaking messy.
That's for other things. Simroy at all. So anyway, all righty. Bilbo is now, by hearing all the scraps of information, he is learning how lucky, there's the luck word again, how lucky he has been in the road that they've wound up taking out of Mirkwood to where they're going. In that, and here's all the reason why, that the roads out of the east towards Mirkwood even have fallen into disuse. Most of the traffic from here on over is on the river. The wood elves and the lake men bicker amongst themselves and about who's supposed to keep up the waterways, so they're not kept up. There have been floods and rains. There have been earthquakes, which have made the marshes wider. Paths have vanished. Bilbo learns that the elf road that they were on was not even maintained up until the end, so they may not have been able to find their way out once they got to the end of it. Um, and it turns out that Bilbo's rescue plan was the only way they could have made it to Laketown, was by going on these barrels to Laketown. They wouldn't have been able to make it any other way. Again,
Oh,
more luck coming through for Bilbo. And then he also thinks it was some comfort to Mr. Baggins shivering on the barrels. It might have been some comfort had he known the news of this had reached Gandalf far away and given him great anxiety, and that Gandalf was in fact finishing his other business, which does not come into this tale. We'll get to that second, and getting ready to come in search of Thorin's company. But Bilbo did not know it. First, Rob, um, Gandalf knows this business is going on. Like, that's interesting that Gandalf has heard about. Do you think he's heard the escape, the imprisonment and escape already?
So when you start talking about narratology, right, and where the story's coming from, anytime you see a sentence that says it might have been some comfort to Mr. Baggins, right? You know that you're stepping away from the character's perspective of the story and into some kind of narrative positioning where the author, narrator, however it might go, is telling you what they know about the broader world.
Yes.
And is basically telling it to their audience in that same kind of knowing.
But the narrator is telling us that Gandalf knows.
But
that's what the narrator
is definitely telling us that Gandalf knows.
Gandalf has some kind of way that he's heard the news. Maybe he's connected with the wood elves.
Maybe he's still talking to the eagles. I mean, we're trying to stay with what we know from the Hobbit here. But, you know, if we actually go through the Silmarillion, we know that the eagles play a much more important part in information.
It certainly raises Gandalf's, stature in this book to know that he can know of things when he's not involved in them. No matter how he knows about it, it would seem magical to people that it would seem like he has some kind of power that he could know about it. But the fact that he does says something that significant about him.
But it also is the narrator or author, because they're not always the same person, right? Being able to say, to reach out to their reader and go, here's what we're going to know from a broader position on the universe than the characters could have known at the time.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting device. It's one that Tolkien continued to play with, right? And sometimes felt like it was falling short here because it was like talking down to children sometimes. And he says that in a letter, but you're right. That to me clearly means that Gandalf knows what's going on. I don't know if is he looking in some scrying device, some unnamed scrying device, because we're not talking about the other books. Is he looking in some unnamed scrying device and being able to see Bilbo floating down the river? We don't know how. But we definitely do know that he would have, been concerned.
Yeah. He's also, we also get the hint here that he's getting ready to come in search of them. So that's something very much that Bilbo doesn't know, that kind of creates an impression for the reader that, okay, like, good, Gandalf's going to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful in noticing that. So those subtle shifts in the narrative positioning when they come up. It's just a storytelling thing that places the reader in a different space with the storyteller from the story they're being told.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to use one that's on the next page too.
Well, wait till then to get to it, because I actually want to back up a little and talk about more of this in that. Well, we'll get to the Gandalf's other business in the Thane's book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That's what we'll talk about there. But one of the lines in this too, as Bilbo's listening to the raft elves, is that the talk was all of the trade that came and went on the waterways and the growth of the traffic on the river. And we'll see a lot of this, especially when they get to Laketown, this idea of the economies of the people.
Are we doing the politics of Laketown?
That's live there. Well, yeah. It's significant enough that it has affected something going on, and he has to mention it. Now, he doesn't go full length, and he's not giving us the economic policy of the Lakemen and the Wood Elves like, Martin would give us that. Yeah. George Martin would give us that stuff, but he has acknowledged that kind of part of this world does exist, that there is a trade economy that affects how these things happen and affects the whole course of, what's going to go on in the landscape and the way people relate to each other and all of this. And so there is a little mention of it there that I find significant because it's all that it's greater depth of this world that we're in. It's not just a very generalized fantasy world. There are significant things about this place.
So those are true, and those are like things that we kind of want to watch for. And there are going to be more of them as we talk about the other people in Laketown. But there's also, he will draw these unique similarities that are at the same time distancing. So there's a sentence on the next page. Only from the map did Bilbo know that away up there, where the stars of the Wain were already twinkling, right? Okay. The Wain is, I mean, wagon, obviously, but we know that. But this is a unique constellation he's describing, except it's not. It's the Big Dipper to us in North America.
Yeah.
But it's called the Plough in England in that, in an earlier time period. He's drawing on a deeper notion of what that word means and giving it a new setting. And this is part of what the beauty is of us, like kind of doing the drill down. He's telling us that these are our same stars, but they had different languages for them, different words for them, and that we've forgotten those words.
That also connects this world with our world. And it's
Absolutely.
the kind of thing in the text that says this place is, you can kind of see, you can see the resemblances to us because this place is the same. It's just a very long time ago. And honestly, though, almost all fantasy up to Tolkien does this. And then when science fiction becomes much more prevalent in the 20th century as it develops, then we start getting whole worlds created. And in fantasy too, and what we would label as fantasy that are, well, that's clearly not on Earth. That is another fantasy world, but it is.
This is not the same as long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not saying, oh, we're going to take that same notion of what and put it over here so we can create whatever we want with it. This is anchoring it.
Yeah.
Some history that we might be familiar with.
Fantasy almost always did this up to Tolkien. And, I mean, you can think of the Conan stories, that Hyborian age, that is some kind of Earth in a previous, it's unhistorical and that it didn't happen, like this Tolkien's Earth here, Middle Earth, is unhistorical and that the Earth wasn't shaped like this at one point, but it's like it could have been, and it's the legend of what could have been in the past. And it also serves as that first point that you were talking about too, there that connecting us, and that it is our world, right?
Yeah. And it's subtle because it's based upon his day job, right? Like he knows that a plow and a wain are once the same thing, and he can kind of play between those two words and their origin in a way that I also like you said a lot last week about thinking about him telling this story to his children, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of fun to think about dad coming home and telling a bedtime story that kind of explains his weird day job, and it kind of does. Like he delights in the things that he could tell them that like come from all these other myths and things.
Well, you also mentioned that Bilbo had about looking at the map. What was, I don't know, I remember the exact line.
Oh, it was just before the Wayne's line.
Only from the map did
Yeah.
Bilbo know that away up there. And this is all about the Long Lake. Bilbo had never imagined that any water that was not the sea could look so big. And hey, whenever there's a mention in a map in a book, if I'm reading a book, I'm looking at the map. So let's look at the
Oh,
map. Uh,
hell yeah.
and this is just he means Thror's map. Um, Here it is. Here it is in the back of our edition at the Rosenbach. And the perspective's different from here. North is on the left hand side, um, not up at the top. So, but here's the running river going down. Here's the gateway of the Long Lake. Um, in Esgaroth, upon the Long Lake dwelt men with the arrow here. So the Laketown is just off to the over the edge of the right here. It's not on this.
I
Um,
always found that surprising that he didn't like shrink the map down a little bit so that he could show Laketown.
well, that's just in this. It is in the Wilderland map.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't have keyed up here, so I'd have to go find it to.
I think part of it is that this map has such a really good diagram of the, almost star-shaped version of the Lonely Mountain,
Yeah,
that he was more focused on delivering that than on showing us the other
yeah.
stuff.
But this is the map that Bilbo is thinking of, so that's why I'm looking at this map. He didn't have that well-detailed map of Wilderland. They didn't have that. Or they wouldn't have to ask Gandalf questions about and Beorn about like what's where and where do we go. They would have had a map. So this is that map here. All righty.
Oh, Beorn. I've always wondered if like about Beorn and his folk and if they'd ever been here before. Because there's no real origin for that.
Beorn would have no reason to go to Laketown.
But without spoilers.
All right. Anyway,
this is the thing that Ed and I do very often, where it's like we use the phrase, let's put a pin in that.
Yeah. All righty. So now he's getting to the end of this this journey, and not far from the mouth of the forest river was the strange town he heard the elves speak of in the king's cellars, and that would be Laketown. And Tolkien has given us a picture in the text.
Yeah.
Here it is in the book. It's a little easier to see. I have a different picture, but here's our Laketown. It was not built on the shore, though there were a few huts and buildings there, but right out on the surface of the lake, protected from the swirl of the entering river by a promontory of rock, which formed a calm bay. A great bridge made out of wood ran out to where on huge piles made of forest trees was built a busy wooden town, not the town of elves, but of men who still men, capital M, and it's a capital M in the text, who still dared to dwell here under the shadow of the distant Dragon Mountain. They still
Dad, can I spend a couple of minutes on the drawing?
Yeah, they still throve on the trade. Oh, more trade talk here that came up the Great River from the south. When Dale in the north was rich and prosperous, they had been wealthy and powerful. And there had been fleets of boats on the water filled with gold and some of the warriors in armor, but now none of all that's gone since the dragon came. But yeah, let's talk about this drawing some.
It's a great drawing. And it actually has some of the other points that I was talking about before with isometric space and flattening things. But first off, all those barrels sitting in the foreground,
Yeah.
is that where the elves live? These poor journeyman yeoman elves have to live there
Well, no, because they have their own place where they gathered them together and then sent them. Now here, as soon as they get there, they go right into the town to feast and hang out.
This is after they come out of the
Yeah.
parish.
So
So
this is
men would have been like taking them from
yeah,
here.
that's all. So they're all, and they can all be in the town from here.
To say, because that's pretty dismal landscape for elves to have to live in.
There was a draft too in his first draft of it that he
Oh
wrote
yeah, I've seen this
far
one
off
too.
on
Yeah.
it that he's even got the dwarves coming out of the barrels, which is funny.
Yeah, it's really also weird. We can talk about this many other times. It's also weird when we think about how Tolkien starts to more and more remove depictions of characters.
Yeah. He
You
doesn't
know,
like the way he draws figures, people.
there's that, but he also starts to think that maybe that's not really good for describing the world, that the world is better served
Hmm.
through more drawings of architecture and, uniforms and things like that, because it therefore it doesn't destroy the fantasy by having you
Well,
identify with a drawing.
he took the dwarves out of that one and instead added, you
This
know,
guy.
this elf guy down here. And they've got the tall, pointy hats too, which make them seem a little, I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe not, maybe in Tolkien's time it wasn't as silly, but it seems a little sillier now, like they're Christmas elves, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And he also drew Christmas elves in all his father letters, Father Christmas
So
letters.
for this drawing, you'll notice again that the horizon line is very near to the middle, which implies wherever the horizon line is, this is a narratology point, but from painting, wherever the horizon line is in an image is where you as the reader stand looking at it, right? Because the vanishing point of the horizon is equal to your eye level.
Hmm.
So if it had been higher, you would be lower. If it had been lower, you would be higher and looking down at things, right? And this causes a psychological element to how we read an image. This is given a really flat space. It's given some perspective to deepen it, but it is largely a very, again, isometric space that we're like being led into. And we no longer see the mountain, which would be way off in the other direction, far to the left side of the drawing as I'm looking at it right now, because river running would have gone up that way for a while, well, a ways.
Yeah.
But it's a brilliant drawing, and it is not a, it's, I guess what I want to, if this was a class, what I want to ask people is, does it look like an impoverished town?
Oh no, I think they're doing okay, but they're just not rich as they were before.
And they feel safer there, right? Um,
I don't know why it
it's
feels
a
I don't
peculiar
know why it
way.
feels safe in a wood town and a lake, but with knowing that there was a dragon in this area once, I don't know why this seems safe to anybody, but
Yeah, I'd head for further hills than this, um, but yeah, that's what I would have to say about this. It's a really, really great drawing, but it is, I said isometric, um, but you've been talking about maps, and in some ways, this one's also more cartographic
hmm. Yeah.
because it's telling you all the buildings are 1 to 2 stories. There's a long bridge that comes out from here.
Mhm.
It's giving
Yeah.
us that kind of perspective.
Yeah. Well, the we learned right away too that the men remembered little. The people that live here don't they remember very little of this place being very rich. They just know that how it exists now. And but it says that though some still sang old songs of the dwarf kings of the mountain, Thror and Thrain, of the race of Durin, and of the coming of the dragon and the fall of the lords of Dale. We'll get a little bit of that song later. Some sang too that Thror and Thraid and the fall of the lords of, and some sang too that Thror and Thrain would come back one day, and gold would flow in rivers through the mountain gates, and all that land would be filled with new song and new laughter. But this pleasant legend did not much affect their daily business because they're businessmen here in Laketown. So we get that impression, that they've got business to do because they've got to keep this place running.
Yeah. And do we want to look at timeline yet? For
No,
how long ago the dragon came? Okay.
no. Thane's book. We're going to look at chronology in Thane's book today.
No.
The barrels are moored, and Bilbo Invisible starts cutting all the barrels free. He frees Thorin first. He's dirty and grumbling, and I think understandably so. What's he been? It's been 2 days in a barrel, with no food or drink, just buffeted around, depending on how much padding. I can't have been much air in there, and but he comes out, groaning and not as, pleasant as he should be. And I love this rep because Bilbo gives him what's what as if Bilbo is Gandalf. Well, are you alive or are you like if you like you could hear this is exactly the words Gandalf would say. Are you alive or are you dead? Are you still in prison or are you free? If you want food and if you want to go on with this silly adventure, it's yours after all and not mine. You'd better slap your arms and rub your legs and try and help me get the others out while there is a chance. I mean, that's a very practical, you need to do this right now. This is, the kind of thing that the way that Gandalf has always given advice so far in this book.
It's totally walk it off, soldier.
Yeah. And that's who, Bilbo is now at this point. Thorin comes to his senses. They get all the other ones out. I like that there are two of them who are okay. Philly and Killy, however, who were young for dwarves and had also been packed more neatly with plenty of straw into smaller casks, came out more or less smiling, with only a bruise or two and a stiffness that soon worn off. Like, woohoo! That was a fun ride.
Yeah.
They're young. The kids do that. The kids
do that. That's where we're gonna go with Feely and Keely for a while. Because they get some good props from Bilbo for being, they're there. They're willing to go when other people are like, I don't know. And they always step up. And there will be repercussions.
Well, Feely was packed in a barrel that had apples in it, so it smelled of apples. And he says, I hope I never smell the smell of apples again. I could eat anything in the wide world now for hours on end, but not an apple. He's just sick. So, sorry, Feely, but this apple slicer is really good. This would change Feely's mind. I would be like, yeah, what about this? And he'd take a few tastes and he'd be right back on the apples, I'm sure. Well, they get them all out, and then Thorin says, well, here we are. And I suppose we ought to thank our stars and Mr. Baggins. I am sure he has the right to expect it, though I wish he could have arranged a more comfortable journey. Still, all very much at your service once more, Mr. Baggins. No doubt we shall feel properly grateful when we are fed and recovered. In the meanwhile, what next? He's
Bilbo's great. He's like, well, I suggest Laketown. What else is there? Like,
and he's being asked. Thorin is not leading anything here. They're saying to Bilbo, okay, now what do we do? He's leading the company, and he has to make the decisions for them. So they go into town. It's just Thorin and Feely and Killy and Bilbo and and people are, well, as they go in, we get a little description of the people in the town, that some of the younger people in the town even openly doubted the existence of any dragon in the mountain. They laughed at the graybeards and gammers who said that they had seen him flying in the sky in their younger days.
Yeah.
Gammer. What's gammer, Rob?
Oh, Ed and I talked a little bit about this beforehand because I always feel like gammer and gaffer is a thing that people get held up on when reading this or Lord of the Rings. They mean old man or old woman. They do not mean grandfather or grandmother, as is popularly believed, right? So if you have read Lord of the Rings, you know, Gaffer Gamgee is Sam's father, not his grandfather.
Yeah.
And he's called Gaffer because he's an old man, and everybody in town calls him old man, and that's a fine thing to be an old man. So Gaffer and Gammer gets sorted out for us here. And again, this is much like I talked about, where I keep thinking about what you guys were saying, or you and Sarah were saying last week about Tolkien telling this to his kids. He's giving them words from his like day job, you know?
I'm familiar with Gammer because of the old centuries ago uses of it. I mean, it's Gammer Burton and Her Needle, I think it's called. It's an old Elizabethan play. It's very early play, like pre-Shakespeare. And it's famous just because it's so early and it has survived. And I just know that phrase from that and what it means. The Gammer Burton is the old woman in that. Um, and
I don't think I knew it for decades, frankly.
Yeah.
I think I had to do a little drill down in order to figure out that for teaching.
He doesn't go whole hog here and give us gaffers and gammers, though. We don't get gaffer till later. Here it's graybeards and gammers, which
Yeah, hands
anytime
are gone.
anytime you get graybeard in a text, I'm all for it. So
As you should be, sir.
Gammer Gurton, thank you. Somebody Elizabeth knows she's Gammer Gurton's needle. That's it.
Of course, Elizabeth knows.
Librarian for the Rosenback. Thank you. We need to know something at the Rosenback. We generally ask Elizabeth Fuller. I'm not joking.
Oh no, we're not joking about that at all.
Great. So they go in, and some of the younger generation doesn't think none of this stuff ever happened, but their astonishment was enormous when Thorin Oakenshield stepped in through the door. Oh, I'm sorry, at least the guards. He comes in. Who are you and what do you want? And right away he gives him Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain. I have come back. I wish to see the master of your town.
He does it like 3 times, though, doesn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's, this is who he is, and this is my business. And I just love the way he comes in with his name. I'm Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia. That's my intro every show. Maybe that's what's in my head. This kind of entrance. Some of them just run out of the hut completely right away. They expect the mountain to go golden in the night and all the waters of the lake to turn yellow right away.
Can I read a little bit of that poem?
Yeah, well, we get to it. Yeah. Oh, the one you were talking about. Tell us about that. What is it?
No, not the Bimble one. That Bimble one.
You mean the song that's going to happen later? No, we'll hit that later.
No, the one where he's talking about where there are people are thinking about like what it means to have the king return.
Yeah, we'll hit it in a minute because it's a little later in the text.
Yeah.
Because now he's just at the guards saying this, and everybody runs out, and they're,
Sorry, he says it 3 times, so I've lost track of where you are.
Yes. So this is the second time, and and they say throw down your weapons, and then we get a reminder here that he doesn't have Orcrist anymore. The Wood Elves have taken his famous sword away from him. If you were thinking in that last chapter, was it last chapter? Yes, that like, hey, what happened to his sword? Why isn't it mentioned? Did Tolkien forget it? No, he didn't forget it. He knows that the elves would have taken it.
It also says Bilbo has Sting but hidden, and I'm like,
as usual.
I'm not sure how a Hobbit can actually hide
I don't know either.
Sort of like,
got the right clothes where he can hide it. Maybe he slips the ring on it.
Maybe that's what he does. Yeah.
Philly even bursts in. We're worn and famished. Like, hey, make haste. Like, no more words. Like, nobody's having, like, these guards aren't stopping anybody. Well, now they get to the hall. Now Thorin comes in again. He says it again. I am Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountains. I return. He is uh um it is his entrance. And everybody leaps to their feet. The master of the town springs up from his chair. Um, it is quite the entrance. The elves who were there, the raft elves who brought them up, recognize him right away. They say, "Hey, these were our prisoners." Um, the master asks him about that, and Thorin says, "But lock nor bar may hinder the homecoming spoken of old." Like he's now in the character of not Thorin, this dwarf who's on the road going up, but he is the the legendary Thorin, son of Thror, son of Thrain, who is coming back to the mountain.
Yeah,
Like
he's sexy Richard Armitage from the Hobbit movies by
yeah.
now. Yeah,
He has accepted this role. Well, not accepted it. He is now, this is the part of the role that he knows he has to play to achieve what they're achieving. And it means something to him. It's not just the role he's playing and that he's faking it. This is truly him. And he's finally, now he gets to come into his own and do this. And he uh he rejects their authority, and I like the master hesitating here.
yeah, it's good. Like it's a little. Tolkien doesn't do that much with politics. He does probably more with politics with the master and Bard and all of that stuff here in The Hobbit than he really even does in Lord of the Rings, frankly. Um, and it's really great. Then the master hesitated and looked from one to the other. The Elven King was very powerful in those parts, and the master wished for no enmity with him, nor did he think much of old songs, giving his mind to trade and tolls, to cargoes and gold, to which habit he owned his position. Others were of different minds, however, and quickly the matter was settled without him.
Yeah.
So there's a thing that he's doing about, oh, there's a political moment starting to happen, which will get carried through, in this chapter and later chapters.
He has to make a choice of political expediency, right? It's like whatever's most convenient for the moment that doesn't affect his standing is what he needs to
And
choose.
he is the first political character that we get from Tolkien, you know? So it's worth noting. Tolkien's not intending to be a political writer, but that's who the master is, and
Yeah.
that's what he's bringing into it. So,
The word spreads immediately that this happened. People are already outside the hall singing the songs that we'll get to here. And Laketown is now party town, is what's going on here. And here's the song, the first song that well, the one song they sing, and this is about like we had the description of this earlier in this chapter, and now this is it. I'll read the first two. You read the last two. The
yeah, the
king.
last two are what I want to deal with. Yeah.
Oh, good. The king beneath the mountain, the king of carven stone, the lord of silver fountains, shall come into his own. His crown shall be upholden, his harp shall be restrung, his halls shall echo golden, to songs of yore resung.
The woods shall wave on mountains and grass beneath the sun. His wealth shall flow in fountains, and the rivers golden run. The streams shall run in gladness, the lake shall shine and burn. All sorrows fail and sadness at the Mountain King's return. And I love it. I absolutely love those last two stanzas. They are hopeful. They're written in a great meter, right? And they sort of force us forward to this notion of all of these things that we will have will come to be true. All those things that we have lost will come to be true simply because this bedraggled, wetted dwarf appeared at our doorstep.
Dirty and, just come out of a barrel after a couple days.
Yeah.
Um, and they, and there's the archaic quality, especially the first two verses, that shall come into his own, the upholden, songs of yore resung. So you get the idea that he's given this idea that these have been around for a long time.
And that in the second ones, it's and the grass beneath the sun is well, like all of this is forward thinking.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I love about this is it's all like the first two stanzas are all about what we used to have. And the second two stanzas are about this is how we shall be redeemed. This is what we've waited for. It's great stuff. And the rhyme scheme is, every once in a while you get people who are like going to read Lord of the Rings for the first time and they kind of skip the poetry. And this is where I go, yeah, don't do that.
All right, let me take this moment before we continue to thank all of you for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to thousands of fellow biblioventures worldwide. I hope you will consider supporting the Rosenbach and this show by donation, which you can do at our website, or by becoming a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and early access to registration. You can learn more about how to become a member on our website. Thank you also to the Wincode Foundation for supporting the Rosenbach. We have many programs and courses at the Rosenbach, including many online. We still have a few online courses coming up, including the medieval T.S. Eliot, looking at the medieval works and events that inspired the works of T.S. Eliot. You can register for those at rosenbach.org. And every year, the Rosenbach holds a very special fundraising event called the Rosenbachanal to support our mission to preserve and share the stories that continue to inspire generations, just like The Hobbit does. And this is the one coming up now. I can find my share button. There it is. The Rosenbachanal 2026 is coming up. It is called An American Treasure. There is a cocktail hour, a seated dinner, performances, and a live auction, and I'll be there. If you attend, you can have a drink with me during the cocktail hour or just at any time during the night. I'll be happy to do that. You can visit the rosenbach.org/Rosenbachanal 2026 for tickets and sponsorship opportunities. Sorry, buttons are slow today. There we go. Well, back to Laketown, Party Town. Things are, they sang songs like that. There was, a lot more of it, shouting, music of harps and of fiddles mixed up with it. And this is where the wood elves themselves begin to wonder greatly and even to be afraid. They did not know, of course, how Thorin had escaped, and they began to think their king might have made a serious mistake. And then the master, as we mentioned too before, he saw there was nothing else for it but to obey the general clamor. This is his moment of political expediency here, for the moment, at any rate, which is also pretty much the definition of political expediency. It's just right now. This is what I have to do right now to go on, and I'll deal with whatever happens in the future. And he also to pretend to believe that Thorin was what he said. He's not completely convinced that he is who he says he is. But for now, he will. He gives Thorin his own share, his place at the table. They're treated like celebrities. They're doctored and fed and housed and pampered. They get a large house. They get boats and rowers put to their service. Crowds are singing songs to them. And they just think that just because he's returned, Smaug's going to be killed and they're going to be rich, richer than they ever were. Um, uh, and they get better, the dwarves. They quickly grew fat and strong again. and they're quite recovered in a week. And Thorin looked and walked as if his kingdom was already regained and Smaug chopped up into little pieces.
Bad idea.
But um, Bilbo isn't so certain. It's nice that the dwarves now are also they're Bilbo because he has rescued them, and now that they've had time to get, fed and fetid, their good feeling towards the little hobbit grew stronger every day. They drink his health, they pat him on the back, they make a big fuss over him. He was, they know they owe a good bit of their success to Bilbo now, and they acknowledge it. But Bilbo had not forgotten the look of the mountain nor the thought of the dragon. And he has a
Can I
cold.
paragraph just before where you are that I think is good for that?
What's that?
Then, for the first time, the master was surprised and a little frightened, and he wondered if Thorin was, after all, really a descendant of the old kings.
Yeah.
He'd never thought that the dwarves would actually dare to approach Smaug, but believed they were frauds who would sooner or later be discovered and be turned out. He was wrong. Thorin, of course, was really the grandson of the king under the mountain, and there is no knowing what a dwarf will not dare and do for revenge or the recovery
Yeah.
of his own. So we get this thing, this veiled political thing about the men of Laketown, and it's gonna blow over. I'll just wait till it blows over, and like, oh shit, they're really gonna go, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, um,
I won't mention it now, but we do have a Thanes book thing to mention about what this day is, and Bilbo's cold, but you're gonna have to wait till then, so stay tuned for the end for the Thanes book.
Yes.
They Yeah, so the master is, it says for the first time he was surprised and a little frightened when they say, "Okay, it's time to go. We have to go to the mountain." He's like, maybe he is a descendant, and he's not." And then, but what you just read, but then after that, he's not sorry at all to let them go.
Yeah.
They're starting to get a little expensive to keep, and their arrival had turned things into a long holiday in which business was at a standstill. So, let them go. What help I can offer will be yours. I'm sure you will reward us with we trust your gratitude when your kingdom is regained. And they leave with lots of supplies and they get people to row them out to the mountain where there's even ponies and horses will meet them with more supplies. And again, at the end of the chapter, we're reminded again, the only person thoroughly unhappy was Bilbo. He thinks that this is is far more dangerous. Like Thorin's walking around like we've already done it. And Bilbo's like, no, I saw that mountain. So you said there was a dragon. So that's where we're heading now. Chapter 11 on the doorstep.
Doorstep.
Well, the men of the town who row them over won't even stay for a night so close to near the shadow of the mountain. That's how much that they, don't like to be there. Not at any rate until the songs have come true, said they. It was easier to believe in the dragon and less easy to believe in Thorin in these wild parts. So they leave the dwarves and Bilbo there. And the landscape itself is, it's just moving up towards the mountain. It's weary. It's a weary journey, a quiet and stealthy one. There was no laughter or song or sound of harps, and the pride and hopes which had stirred in their hearts at the singing of old songs by the lake died away to a plodding gloom. So now the dwarves are taking on this same feeling that Bilbo has. It's bleak, it's barren, there's little grass, broken and blackened stumps. They were come to the desolation of the dragon, and they were come
The thing on that, I
late
love the
the
fact that the desolation of the dragon is capitalized is given, it's almost like a map
It
coordination.
is on the map. On the map, it says the desolation of
Yeah,
Smaug.
right.
Yeah.
I think that that's a really great thing there.
Yeah.
Last, the desolation of the dragon, and we will learn more about how the dragon affects the people that are underneath that area, right? But this is a bad thing, and it gets, those letters get capitalized because it is a defining moment on the map. You go here, you're in the desolation of the dragon.
Yep. Well, they make their first camp on the one side, and then they which ended in a height called Ravenhill. And there's just little details and little names that we get attached here, and they're all and all the natural, most of the place names are very simple. You know, the hill. This is the mountain, capital M. Even a place like Ravenhill, it's obviously there were ravens on that hill at some point when it was named, I'm sure. There was an old watch post there, but they don't want to go up too high. Uh, they scout out. They go to scout out the land to the south where the front gate stood. So just Balin and Feely and Killy and Bilbo go there. Um, they could see in the wide valley, shadowed by the mountain's arms, the gray ruins of ancient houses, towers, and walls. And Balin says that's Dale. That's, and then we learn also that he had, I think this is the first time, is this the first time in the text that we learn? He says he had been one of Thorin's companions on the day the dragon came. I don't
Yeah,
remember if we learned that in the first chapter or not.
we didn't. And I would also point out that this is one of the times that we get to see the surroundings of the Lonely Mountain. There were outposts, there were other things, the
Yeah.
right across the way. And we also get a sense of the time it takes to move through this landscape. As we get into the, every time I think about this book, I think about how long the whole thing takes, right? And it takes a lot of time between Laketown, when the dwarves and the Hobbit get there, and Smaug's attack, and then the Battle of the Five Armies. There's a lot of time that has elapsed in those moments.
I don't know what those things are yet, but we will get to them.
But they they happen in what is narratively called short time, and then, but without a lot of definition. This chapter has a lot of, it took this week or that week, or how many times, how long did it take for them to find the door?
Mm-hmm.
All that's delineated here.
Let's look at the picture. Because what they're looking at right now is the front gate, and that's the other illustration we get.
Yeah.
In this chapter, each chapter has an illustration this week. Here's the front gate in the book. Can I have a better one of that? There it is, a little better. Looking not like the vacation spot. Like I don't want to go vacation there.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, he's got the steam coming out the front gate here, and the water is just. I know it's a black and white drawing, but then because the water is all black, it looks, gruesome. You don't want a blackened water as a waterway. The stunted tree here that's just wasted away. Yeah, this is, out of the waters of the running river, out of it, the gate, the waters of the running river sprang, and out of it too there came a steam and a dark smoke. Nothing moved in the waste save the vapor and the water, and every now and again a black and ominous crow. The only sound was the sound of the stony water, and every now and again the harsh croak of a bird. Balin shuddered. Let us return, he said. We can do no good here. And I don't like these dark birds. They look like spies of evil.
Yeah, and if Balin shudders, that's bad.
Yeah, because this is home to him.
Yeah.
Like I know that he understands that it's been taken over by a dragon and it looks this bleak, but it is still home. But he's frightened just looking at it as well. Bilbo asked if the smoke means the dragon's still under there, and he says, "Well, it doesn't prove it, though I don't doubt you are right." He says, "I expect smokes and streams and steams would come out of the gates. All the halls within must be filled with his foul reek."
I might, as the artist in the room, draw attention to the concentric circles in the lonely mountain up above, which makes it seem shorter than it probably was,
Yeah.
but fits the page. And in the line work over to the left hand side, there you go. That is the sort of extension that leads off to the other watches that they have.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's a really, that drawing is a really deliberate drawing, but the shape of it is probably too short for what they really wanted, what he really imagined at the time.
Bilbo thinks only in June they had been guests in the fair house of Elrond. And though autumn was now crawling towards winter, that pleasant time now seemed years ago. And they were alone in the perilous waste without hope of further help. They were at the end of their journey, but as far as ever, it seemed, from the end of their quest. None of them had much spirit left. But it says now, strange to say, Mr. Baggins had more than the others. He would get Thorin's map out and he'd look at it and he'd ponder the map, and he remembers the moon letters on the map. Um, and he's, you guys need to look for the door. Everybody. That's what we need to find. There says there's a secret door. There's a hand pointing to it on the map. And they do that. They find this little area up top that's really hard to access. It's, you got to go through this path and they've got to pull supplies up. It's very difficult to get up to, but they can, and it's not a cave, and was open to the sky above. And at its inner end, a flat wall rose up that in the lower part, close to the ground, was as smooth and upright as mason's work, but without a joint or crevice to be seen. No sign was there of post or lintel or threshold, nor any sign of bar or bolt or keyhole. Yet they did not doubt that they had found the door at last. The dwarves know, like, that's the door right there. They can just tell by the shape, how smooth it is, how perfect it is. This is the door. This isn't a natural formation. This is what a dwarf secret door looks like.
Well, there's also that earlier illustration that leads to how they get up to that platform where the door should be, and they're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what they're talking about. And so the dwarves gain their agency back a little bit, which I think is good, right? Yeah. And so they're like, oh, okay, great, but they still don't know how to open it because they're waiting for another cue from the poem on the map, right? That hasn't happened yet.
And they're trying to figure out well, first, they don't even think of this. They beat on the door, they thrust and pushed it, they implored it to move, they spoke fragments of broken spells of opening, and nothing stirred. I mean, what they don't remember is that the moon letters, which were stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Doran's day will shine upon the keyhole.
So that's why I mentioned that, is because I think there's a readiness or an arrogance even in the dwarves at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we found it. This is exactly where it should be.
Yeah.
But they've been told that they can't open it that way.
Yeah.
and they won't wait. And they keep forcing it, you know.
They
And not
all come up.
horse can get up there either. Bomber
Yeah, I
does.
mean it's hard. They have to get ropes. They have to bring everybody up. Everybody goes up except Bomber because he says, I'm too fat for such fly walks. I should turn dizzy and tread in my beard, and then you would be 13 again." So luckily for him, that was not true, as you will see, the narrator tells us. But we won't get to as you will see in this chapter. That'll happen in the next. Um, Bilbo is still thinking about this. They well, they're not paying attention to what the rune letter said. Bilbo is sitting and thinking about it. But he also starts drifting back. He's actually thinking of home. Um, uh, it says in remembering in his he's thinking of his Hobbit hole long ago when he said this, and you said sitting on the doorstep and thinking would be my job, and to mention getting inside. So I am sitting and thinking, he has told them, but he's really just thinking of his hobbit hole. And then Thorin says, tomorrow begins the last week of autumn. This is the last week of autumn. That is Doran's Day. That's mentioned in the moon letters that are on there. The first day of the dwarves' new year, the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. So that's when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. And we'll see this in a minute.
All right, I got something here that you went a little past. I'm going to go back to because it's a little bit of a Bilbo thing. Um, it's a little bit of a Bilbo knows the story bigger than the others do, and he's trying to get there. He's trying to figure it out. Um, Out up there a silence reigned, broken by no bird or sound except that of the wind in the crannies of stone. They spoke low and never called or sang, for danger brooded in every rock. Right? A bird will actually come, which Bilbo will know that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But up here, they're like, okay, we found where we think the door is, but we don't know how to open it. We don't know how to go there. We don't know where it is. We think it's here. And Bilbo is he's kind of waiting for the bird, which I think is really great here. This is in that narratology thing. This is us going back to where the author narrator is telling you, oh, right, we told you about the bird, right? He's going to wait for the bird and then it'll happen. So it becomes this foreshadowing moment. And only Bilbo will realize that.
Yes, because they don't. They're like, maybe we need to, we brought a burglar. Let's send him to the front door. And Bilbo's like, no, I'm not walking in the front door. Um, uh, they and even thinks like perhaps the wizard will suddenly come back today.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
but he doesn't. Instead, what happens is what, the moon letters said was going to happen. Soon he saw the orange ball of the sun sinking toward the level of his eyes. He went to the opening, and there, pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of the earth. The moon and the sun are in the sky at the same time. At that very moment, he heard a sharp crack behind him when the thrush knocks. And what it was an enormous thrush had picked up a snail and was cracking it on the stone to break it open. And that's the crack he hears when the thrush knocks. And then the little moon dipping on the horizon, evening was coming on. Suddenly, when their hope was lowest, a red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. The old thrush, who had been watching from a high perch with beady eyes and head cocked on one side, gave a sudden trill. I love that there's this bird song that happens right there.
I'm going to back you up just a little bit. Bilbo sat gloomily on the grass bay, gazing at the stone out west through the narrow opening. He had a queer feeling that he was waiting for something.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah.
The Bilbo, like many other characters within Lord of the Rings, has a certain kind of burgeoning prescient quality. You know, he had this queer feeling that he was waiting for something.
It's not that the dwarves don't. Like they seem to be like this is their home. They should be in tune to this moment.
Dwarves suck.
And they're not. Bilbo is. Bilbo's ready for it. And then even the dwarves.
I've got to wait for this thrush knocking.
And then the bird sings, the rock starts to split, a hole appears, and the dwarves start pushing on it. It's Bilbo again. The key. Where is Thorin?
Yeah.
Thorin comes up with the key that went with the map. And Thorin pulls it out, fits it in, turns, snap. The gleam went out, the sun sank, the moon was gone, and evening sprang into the sky. And then they're able to push open this door, 5 feet high and 3 feet broad it was, and slowly, without a sound, swung inwards. The chapter ends. It seemed as if the darkness flowed out like a vapor from the hole in the mountainside, and deep darkness in which nothing could be seen lay before their eyes, mouth leading in and down. So it's just in time, but it's all due to Bilbo. You're right. He thinks he's the one thinking that he has the premonition. This is when it's going to happen. He's thinking of the moon letters. He's prepared when it happens. And when it does, he's the one that calls for the key.
He knows there will be a bird. He knows the thrush must knock. Right? They totally forget about that.
Yeah. All righty. Well, we'll have to wait till the next chapter to see what happens with this darkness pouring out of the doorway. We good? We gonna go to the Thane's book?
Thane's book.
Thank you very much. Bilbo has a cold, and on his birthday, on his 111st birthday, many years later, he gives a speech, and in that speech, he says, "It is also, if I may be allowed to refer to ancient history, the anniversary of my arrival by barrel at Esgaroth on the Long Lake, though the fact that it was my birthday slipped my memory on that occasion. I was only 51 then, and birthdays did not seem so important. The banquet was very splendid. However, though I had a bad cold at the time, I remember, and could only say, 'Thank you very much.' I now repeat it more correctly. Thank you very much for coming to my little party." It's Bilbo's birthday, and he doesn't know it. But of course, Tolkien didn't know it either. It becomes his birthday later when he has to figure out the timeline of everything. And he's like, oh, that's when, it would have been. And it fit perfectly. So there you go.
The timelines are really wonderful exercise in people who want to learn deeper elements of how Tolkien built Middle Earth, because the timeline is retcon. The timeline, is the biggest example of that. And the story that we're dealing with here, there's retcon, and that's why we do the Thane's book. But the fact of the matter is that by the time he was retconning it for Lord of the Rings, he wanted a lot of deeper history to fit in for the Silmarillion, and a lot of things that he didn't do, that he alluded to in the Lord of the Rings, that shouldn't bind us for our reading of The Hobbit, right? We could talk about them.
Well, I do want to give people a little perspective on the chronology here, and you can just it's for Lord of the Rings people. You don't have to know this for reading The Hobbit at all. This is only to kind of if especially if you've only read Lord of the Rings, in the appendices, he has a long chronology that he's worked out everything, and almost all of it works. Is precise and works. Uh there's a bit that kind of pertains to the Hobbit, and I'll just share this little Word document. Uh This is the third age. There are three ages of Middle Earth, first, second, and third. This is the third age. And the third age in 1999, that's when the dwarves first came to the Lonely Mountain, to Erebor, in 1999. And Smaug attacked in 2770. So what's that? 700 years, after. So 770 years after. In 2850, Gandalf met Thorin's father, and got the map and the key when Gandalf found him in the dungeons of Dol Guldur in Mordor, in Mirkwood. So 2850, that's when Gandalf got that map and key. Bilbo's not even born until 2890, 40 years later.
And I think that the idea that Gandalf walks around with his map and key, doesn't really know like its significance.
He had it for a long time.
40 years,
Oh,
right?
it's longer than that. That's just until
Oh yeah,
Bilbo's born.
Bilbo's 50 when he actually gives it.
Until 2941. He had that map for 100 and what? Almost 200 years. He had that. No, I'm sorry, almost 100 years, right? Yes, almost 100 years. 90 years he has that map. And
Yeah, and he does explain it to Thorin, like, oh well, I didn't think this was all that important until now, and this is how we think that Gandalf is like
no, you're
above.
right. It's 50. No, it's 50 years, right? Wait, when's Bilbo? Oh no, because 1850. Yeah, so it's 50 and 40. Yeah, 90 years. At least he got that. So yeah. And I just
But
threw that in there that Aragorn was born in 2931. So if you're more
that's
than
fine, and Aragorn's very
just to
important.
give you a perspective of these people and important people and what's going on here. But it has been, now that it's 2941, it has been since Smaug attacked, is almost 200 years ago for these people. And that's it's no wonder that they've started to, like, yeah, that was something long ago in the past, especially in an age where you only have oral culture and a little bit of written culture to keep memory alive.
So
Things seem like a very long time ago. One of the other things that we get reminded of in this chapter is we get this mention that Gandalf not only has business, but it is that he took care of that. Where's the line exactly? He has business. I have the quote here. That which does not come into this tale, it says in the text. And that, which kind of infers that it's business that comes into another tale of adventures, maybe. Um, and at the time, and that's in the first edition of The Hobbit. Tolkien had written that as if there's another story here that I'm not telling you about Gandalf and something he's taking care of, but it is before he has come up with the idea at all of not only the ring, but even of that the necromancer is Sauron, of what will happen, what Gandalf is doing then. That all comes many years later when he's working on Lord of the Rings.
and I'm going to read it just because I've got it, and it's a good way for like noticing that difference. Gandalf, far away and given him great anxiety, and that he was in fact finishing his other business, which does not come into this tale. So we talked about this when we said that Gandalf seems to know what's going on with Bilbo, but he's also like, did he finish his problems over there? Or was he part of a thing that was over there that hasn't been entirely finished? And we don't know.
Well, we do know from the Quest of Erebor what this business he has done at this point. Quest of Erebor, which you've mentioned in the chat a bunch of times, is in the is it in the appendices? No, it was he written it for the appendices, but it didn't get included, and so it was in Unfinished Tales, later published in Unfinished Tales. So it is, and it's in the back of the Douglas Anderson's annotated Hobbit as well. It is Gandalf explaining to Gimli and Frodo and maybe some of the others the whole how he first met Thorin and why he met Thorin and the things that happened. And what we learn is the business then was that the White Council had met and was deciding that they had to take action against the necromancer in Dol Guldur. And the White Council is something that had met a few times during the Third Age, and Galadriel calls it. She's the one that summons the White Council to meet. Saruman is the head of it. Gandalf, it was proposed should be the head, but he declined, and then Saruman became the head of it. This will lead to all kinds of problems in the future. Elrond is on it. Círdan, who is the elf who's in charge for the Grey Havens, is also on it as well. And they meet and they have decided that it's time to well, Gandalf knows already it's Sauron. Sauron is the necromancer. He's coming back into power. We need to take care of him. And so while the elves or not the elves, while the dwarves are upset that Gandalf's just leaving us and they get captured by the wood elves, Gandalf is literally going to battle Sauron.
And I'm going to stop you.
Go
I
ahead.
don't think that Gandalf knows. We're in the Thames book, so I can say this freely. That the necromancer is indeed Sauron.
I think he does, and I think I looked this up today, and that he found that he knows it already. I think it even says in the Quest for Erebor, doesn't it?
It does say it in the Quest for Erebor, but the Quest for Erebor is written after the Return of the King. And so therefore, that's Gandalf talking about, oh, well, yes, this I knew. Right? And so the White Council trying to decide what to do about the necromancer remains a question about, well, who is this guy for a long time? And Saruman, who is the head of the White Council, does not believe that he is anything to do.
2850, when Gandalf went in and found Thrain, in the appendices it says Gandalf discovers that its master, Dol Guldar's master, is indeed Sauron.
I think that Gandalf knew it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Gandalf knows it. Yeah.
But I don't think the White Council accepted it.
Oh, no. Well, that's because Saruman doesn't. Because Saruman wants the ring.
Cards of the White Council.
Saruman just wants the ring. So
and that's what the whole thing about is, that Galadriel wants Gandalf to be head of the White Council.
Yeah.
But no, it's Saruman. And so he goes another way.
Yep.
Right. And so there's stuff there.
Saruman knows too. Saruman knows, but he doesn't want to say it because he wants the ring. He doesn't want if it is Sauron, Saruman wants them to leave him alone because he's hoping he could, that him being left alone might lead him to finding out where the ring is.
Saruman, we are so deeply in the Thanes book right now. So for those of you who haven't read further, sorry, but here we are. Saruman is in Orthanc. In Orthanc is the evidence of what happened to Isildur and the fall of the ring from his finger.
Uh-huh.
Saruman has been watching this for a very long
Yeah.
time, right? He's been studying ring theory, technology. I don't know what you call it. He's been studying ring lore, as they call it in the books, and wants to make rings for himself. But he knows that this ring is not really gone, even though he tells everybody else it's gone.
Yeah.
And he's in the position because in Orthanc has the armor of Isildur. After he died, it was brought there.
Yeah.
So, uh, so he knows more about what might have happened to the ring
Yeah.
than he tells the White Council.
Yes. Gandalf doesn't really know where the ring is. He has no inkling. Because it's
He doesn't.
yes.
He
Yeah.
thinks the ring is like gone,
Well, hopes it is. Yes.
but Saruman does not hope that.
So this is what the business is that he had to do, and it had a great bearing on the entire history of everything that happens in Lord of the Rings. Um, uh, you could also say it's kind of a mistake that they perhaps should have kept Sauron there a little longer but they don't know. They don't know if, I mean, it doesn't, it becomes a mistake in that they don't think Sauron can is powerful enough to go and take over Mordor again, and he is. And if they had maybe tried to contain him a little longer, it might have been easier to deal with him.
Good question.
All righty.
He was corrupting Mirkwood, though.
Yes. Well, Wood Elves can handle it.
Could they?
Wood Elves are pretty powerful. All righty.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us for episode 9 of Biblioventures and Hobbit. Rob, thank you for joining. You will return in a few weeks for chapters 15 and 16, right?
I always seem to wind up on the double chapters.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I don't know why. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, that just hit the way in the run. So the way we divided it up. Next week for episode 10, Graham Cheadle will return as co-host for chapter 12, Inside Information. What happens in chapter 12? I would just put it this way. Dr. Watson meets Sherlock Holmes. There's a little puzzle for you guys to figure out. Some of you will know it right off the bat. Thank you to all of you who have made a donation to the Rosenbach or become a member. We couldn't do these shows without your generous support. Your donations help us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You can also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website, rosenbach.org. Thanks as always to the Wincode Foundation. Thank you all for watching this series. Spread the word. More people can watch it, and that's fine by me. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, opening the...
I'm going to ask you a question before you close off.
What's that? After or?
I'm going to ask you a question before you close.
Before? I'm sorry? Go ahead.
Ask you one before you close, because people will listen. Will there be a Silmarillion Biblio?
I don't know. You can't say that now.
Ha ha!
I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, opening the secret door to your bookish treasures. Thanks much, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, everybody. Great session.